board workshop for November. Again, welcome. We'll start off with the pledge of the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we start, I want to say congratulations to the folks on the board who ran for re-election and will be back. And we have some new board members who will be joining us. I know we have another meeting or so with our retiring board members, but I want to thank those folks for their hard work and service and camaraderie on the board. I think we've had a good year, and it's been a great bunch of people to work with. You too, Jerry. Second. So with that, we had fun up here, and I really do appreciate, how boards come together. We're hard on some of these very difficult issues and problems on behalf of our community, on behalf of our students and our school. The first area for us to open up with would be public comments under our special voting meeting. It's an opportunity for anyone in the community, in the audience who would like to approach the board on any topics relative to the agenda or anything else that might be pertinent for the board to hear at this time. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move on to our personnel committee and the help us out.
Thank you, Dr. Hamburger, and congratulations to you too as well. It's recommended the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following resignations: the administrative staff, support staff, food service staff.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
It's recommended the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following appointments: administrative staff, certificated staff, and support staff.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, so Dr. Phillips, you want to introduce one of our administrative staff?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Hamburger. Courtney Epler is our new food service supervisor. I know she's here. She wanted to say a few words, so if you would please welcome and. Leave a few words. Thank you very much. That's right.
And so that's it for. So is there anything left? Okay. Who'd you just? Go ahead.
Courtney, just one word of advice to you. You handled that perfectly, because there's an old saying that says you never have to explain what you don't say. It's recommended the Board of School Directors approves or ratifies the following requests for a change of status and support staff.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. This time I'll accept the motion for adjournment. Second. All in favor? We're adjourned. So we're adjourning this meeting. I think we can move right into our board workshop meeting. And we're going to start this meeting with Mr. Massa, our principal at Jacksonville. And welcome.
Thank you.
For your presentation.
Thank you. Well, I wish I could be a woman of few words, but I'm going to try to keep it short. But I'm very enthusiastic about what I want to share with you that's happening at Jacksonville, and all of you behind me too. So When we started at Jacksonville on our first day, one of our words that we are working with is called connected. So how are we connected to each other, to our students, to our families, to the community, and to central office and our district at large? So we started with a mission. And with that, we talked about what does it mean to be a lifelong learner. So what does that look like at Jacksonville? What does it look like to be an engaged citizen? And how are we setting our students up for a global community? So we talk about how do we get kids curious about learning, because when they're curious, there's a want and a desire to learn. How do we engage our students? How do we build voice and choice in their learning? And how are we using technology to enhance and promote and improve learning? So I am a backwards planner, so I'm taking you through a backwards design. That works, or not. So here are our PSSA scores from last year in reading. And if we notice a little more than half of the pie, students are performing well. A little less than half of the pie, they're underperforming. So when we look at half is a large number. How is that attainable? It's almost slightly discouraging. But there's a lot of really great things happening at Jackson Wold. And if we look at the scaled scores, and we focus specifically on the cut scores, which move us from one domain to the next. Now, you don't have to memorize these scores because I kind of highlighted them for you here. I looked at how many total students we have in below basic. And those scores that are highlighted in yellow mean that they are just maybe 1, 2, possibly 3 questions shy of moving from one domain into the next domain, which is that basic category. And those students that are highlighted, maybe about 11, 12 students, can move by 1, 2, or 3 questions into our proficient category. And those students who are highlighted, about 9, 10, can move into that advanced category. So what does it mean? It means we're going to focus on growth. It doesn't mean we're just moving those students that are highlighted in yellow. It means that we are trying to grow our students' learning and focus on that growth, because we're going to focus on the process, and hopefully that will change the product. So what's next for us here at Jackson Wold? Well, we're focusing on instruction, on technology, and interventions K to 4. And I'm not going to go step by step through all of them with you, but I do want to share with you that I've been in every single classroom with a formalized walkthrough in all of the classrooms, in the learning support, in speech, anyone who is working, any professional working with our kids, I gave them formal feedback on their instructional practices. I also want you to know that we are taking steps to work collectively with Melissa Devlin and Karen D'Annunzio, looking at the data as a grade level and what do our students need to be successful in literacy. So one of the things that we did is we took time in our Tier 1 interventions, that's for all students, and we really got teachers to learn their students as readers and get to know who they are as readers so that we can best support them moving forward in Tier 2 or Tier 3 interventions. So, what did we do with math? If we look at this math data, we're again, well, this is a little less than half performing proficient or advanced, and a little bit more than half is underperforming. So what does that mean? Because that's also discouraging for us if we're looking at a whole pie. Again, we look at these scaled scores, and if we look just at these cut scores right here, when we desegregate that data and we look at it holistically, we see that we have students potentially able to move, I believe like we even have like 999 right here is basic. That's like a point away from moving into that proficient category. So it might just be slight tweaks that we really need to be focused on to really move our students and help them grow. So what's next in math? Instruction, technology, and I'm going to get to that student input in just a little bit. How are we utilizing our math time? Whole group versus small group. I heard Andy talk about that. Really important. When I walked into one of those classrooms and I saw the teacher sitting on the floor working one-on-one with the students while other students were using technology and other students were using manipulatives and doing different projects in math, I saw everyone learning in a differentiated model where they are right now and moving. And that teacher is doing really well because her PFAS scores are in the dark blue, so she is promoting growth. And I do want to highlight Dreambox for 1 second because my teachers talk to other teachers, and I love that across the district. And I know Dr. Holler, I'm going to give her a shout out, that she used Dreambox as a challenge across the school. And with that challenge, her 4th grade teachers are all in dark blue. That means they're all showing growth consecutively over a 3-year period. And that's a great model for us. So we're adopting that like Dreambox challenge to kind of help and support students. Now here's where I get excited, so hold on. Student input. I had lunch with every single student in the building. And at lunch, we had this conversation, and we were like in 6 to 8 students at a time. What makes school fun? I said, what gets you out of bed and excited to come to school every morning? This is fun. Anyone want to take a guess? Top 3 answers. This is the board. This is the chalkboard wall that they created on their own with letters, words, pictures. Recess.
Gym.
Lunch. Lunch was a few. Yeah. Recess and gym. Any others? Math. Music. Friends. I love you guys. Okay, top 3 answers. Recess and gym. Friends and teachers. And math. I'm going to give you that credit, but I'll keep your secret. This is what it tells me, and I'm circling back. What it tells me is that recess and gym, what does that say? Kids like whole body learning. They like to have a choice and a voice in what they're doing. They want some ownership in their learning. Friends and teachers, they need those relationships. Those relationships build trust, and then they're willing to take risks in their learning. And math, this is amazing. So many students said math, and it makes me think, well, now we have the motivation. Why are we swinging in the opposite direction? That I can't answer just yet, but it has me curious because there is a desire there, and we can't teach motivation. So these students are already motivated, so that tells me we just maybe have to shift the way we do some things to really get them highly engaged. So, as I said, our word of the year is connected, and each teacher got a Lego piece with their one word that they shared with me over the summer. So this summer I did a culture survey through a Google form, and 47 teachers responded to that culture survey. I should say staff, because it went to everyone. And then I met face-to-face with 52 staff members, all of my teachers, and then some aides between July and August before we started. So when we started the year, I had already learned everyone and knew who they were and what was important to them. And these were their one words that they brought back to me. So this is our bridge. Every time we meet as a faculty, we bring this Lego piece and we make a connection by some sort of challenge. So this is our bridge. We're going to build something this week when we meet in November, and then when we leave our faculty meeting, each staff member is encouraged to take a different Lego piece and keep record of the Lego pieces they have to kind of inspire them and support them throughout the month. So I am going to just share a little bit of data that I got from the staff at the beginning. Here are my survey results. The strengths of Jackson Wald are community, positive, and teamwork. So that is motivation right there before I even actually had any interaction with them. The growth areas, school-wide positive behavior, discipline, clear communication, and hands-on leaders. Hands-on leader. I'm not going to go through that with you, but I can tell you that our website has been updated to make sure that our school-wide positive behavior support plan is on there, and I communicate that with staff and a team. We have a committee as well as parents on a monthly basis through my newsletter. This is what I'm going to end you with, because I talked about global community. I like to practice what I preach. If I want my teachers invested in using technology, I try and use it with them as well. So I encourage them to do 1 second a day videos to collect evidence for their domain or professional development as they are moving towards their differentiated supervision plan, or as well as if they're doing I'm doing an observation on them. So this is the way I want them to collect their evidence. But this is our evidence, and I apologize for the resolution. Joe Way said it was good, so I trust Joe Way. So as I make it bigger, it's going to be, it might be a little, you don't really have to worry about the volume. And that is all I have. So I hope I didn't take up too much time, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for that presentation, excellent job. When I visited your office, you showed me some methods that you were using to communicate with parents and to communicate with staff. Can you just describe some of the ways that you reach out and stay connected to those folks?
Okay, great, yes. I do utilize Facebook on a weekly basis. I try to post pictures. One thing that I have my staff do is we have a shared Google Drive of pictures, so anytime staff members are taking pictures in their classroom or something fun that they're doing, they put those pictures right in our shared Google Drive, and then I upload those pictures and share those with staff via Facebook and Twitter. I also do a monthly, I use some more for my communication, and I do that monthly with parents, where I also share pictures, I share things that are happening, I give them information about what's happening that month, as well as upcoming things they can get ready for. I even make them aware of when we're having tentative fire drills, just so they can have those conversations with their kids if they need to. I utilize the website as well, and I use the Principal Corner as a way. Every month I add stuff, and it's more like what you could do with your kids during the fall, like kind of like more of a parenting from one parent to another. That's kind of how I share some information of fun activities to do, things to think about, and I'll always do a book recommendation. So I'm a book person. I love to read to students, and I love to share my favorite books with staff, so I also share those with the families, and we promote it that way as well. And I take short videos, clips, and I'll put those on Facebook and also implement that. So I try to do and use the parent link as often as I can to really communicate and let parents know this is what we're doing at Jackson Hall. Got some really great feedback from it, but I'm always open to new suggestions. That's how I share with families and communicate.
Any other questions? We'll let you off the hook this time. Thanks, Mrs. Moss.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on in our agenda to our presentation which involves a draft of the preliminary general fund budget, that resolution. All your discussion there. Mrs. Gash.
You're fine.
Each of the board members has a printout of the short PowerPoint presentation. This is short, and some supporting data on revenue and expenditures. Last month, we had discussed about adopting the opt-out resolution to stay within the Act 1 index, or to go ahead and adopt a preliminary general fund budget. So over the past several weeks, administrators have been compiling their budget information for 2020-2021. So the reason I say draft is a lot of it's still under review, but this presentation will just give you an overall summary of what it's going to look like. Last month I had indicated, I shared from my 5-year projection from last spring that we would probably be what the deficit would look like for 2021 with no tax increase. And as you'll see in a couple slides, that's pretty much where we're at. So just to give you a quick overview. And looking at revenue for 2021, our local source of revenue is going to go down about $270,000. We've had a decrease in assessed value, approximately $6.7 million. We just finished the regular appeals. We still are getting appeals every year on residential. We also had a couple, one large commercial being the former Giant Center. The Township purchased that. Based on the sale price, the Board of Assessment did reduce their request for assessed value reduction. That was one thing. The Reading Country Club also received an exemption on the part that was the former Viva, because they have no commercial establishment in there, and they haven't since December of 2017. The board granted an exemption on that. And there were a few other appeals as well, but overall, that's why our local source of revenue with no tax increase will be going down. State revenue, I'm assuming that the governor's budget might look the same as it did for the current year, but we won't know that until February. And also our retirement and Social Security subsidies, that's driven by wage and benefit increases. The bottom line, I'll point out, other sources of revenue, $738,000 increase. That has to do with financing. You know, we have financed our Chromebooks, iPads, etc. What I've included in this draft of a budget is there is requests for upgrades of labs, refreshing Chromebooks, more iPads. And all that totals about $621,000, but I've also rolled in financing transportation vehicles. How the financing is all going to play out for all of this, I don't know yet, but that's why there's an increase. Because when you finance your asset, you have to record the source of revenue as an other source, but you also record the total value of the equipment on the expenditure side. But really what's hitting your bottom line or your cash flow is your interest and principal payment. But that's why this shows up this way. Again, looking at our assessed value, a little bit of a roller coaster ride over the years. And fortunately we had a huge bump in 17-18 when we did a reverse appeal on the Exeter Commons, even though following that there were some appeals which were settled. Looking at general fund expenditures, looking at a $3 million increase. No, maybe about it.
Anyway, I'll use my teacher voice, not that I have much of one. But expenditures, $3.3 million. Obviously, I've had to include some assumptions about wage increases. We have 2 large contracts, teacher and support, which are expiring at the end of this fiscal year. But looking at an increase in wages of $1.1 million, benefits another $1.1 million. So that's where the majority of the increase is, $2.2 million. Other areas of increase I want to note between professional and other purchase services. If you net these two, it's about a $330,000 increase. We are still in the budget. We are still seeing some increases in special ed contracted services for next year. Again, other areas are going down, mainly due, for example, supplies and books and software. We have purchased social studies,
thank you, Dr. Phillips, social studies and science software, and that has a 6-year term, so that's the reason for that reduction. Again, property increase, that has to do with not only the things I mentioned with technology, but also replacing security cameras as well as interactive whiteboards. We're on a cycle of trying to get all of those replaced because they are they've aged out, basically. And again, the financing number is up because of what I just explained about financing our technology and vehicle assets. So just drilling down to employee wages and benefits again, and looking at an average over 4 years, the increase from 1920 to next year based upon the assumptions at this point in time, we're pretty consistent in our increases year over year. And the point here is that these increases are real based upon our current staff and offering contractual increases and also meeting the PSER's contribution rate as well as the increase in healthcare premium. So we can pretty much count on in the future increases similar to this in the range of 2.2 to $2.5 million. So those numbers are real, and that's assuming the current staffing levels. And again, this does not include any cost of new staff requests. We've had just a few, and we're evaluating them, and that would add $250,000 to this increase. But again, we also don't have the impact of retirements. Retirements, historically, any savings, that helps support any new staff requests that we get actually each year. So looking at the other non-payroll expenses, objects 300 through 900. Again, as I mentioned on the summary slide, looking at contracted services, this number now reflects the full year of Laurel Life. When the budget was adopted in 1920, in the second meeting in June, the agreement for Laurel Life was on the agenda as well. So the full contracted amount of $1 million was not up in this line item. Since October 1, we have moved money around to have it in the appropriate line item, but this just reflects what the adopted budget was. But again, if you net out your professional contracted services and private tuition, we're still seeing an increase of $238,000. And again, I mentioned the impact of the social study and science license purchase. That's why that number is going down. I mentioned security camera replacement, interactive whiteboard, as well as financing. Our project number, small capital project, $312,000. We are costing those out. That's based upon the projects from the facility study, as well as what principals have requested for next year. The Act 1 index is 3.3% for Exeter School District for 2021. And based upon our current millage of 33.1107, we could raise it to 34.1969. If the school board chooses the opt-out resolution, we would have to stay at this percentage increase or lower. If the board would choose to adopt a preliminary budget, that would allow them to apply for exceptions. Referendum exceptions, again, that's items for special education, which we would qualify for, that are increasing higher than the rate of 3.3%. So we would qualify for special ed exception of about 1.2 million, or would add 0.88 of an additional mill. So the maximum based upon these numbers, if the board were to apply or want to adopt a preliminary budget, the maximum increase would be 6% to 35, just over 35 mils. This brings us to the summary of revenue, expense, and fund balance. Current year, again, adopted with a deficit or use of fund balance. It was a purposeful use of fund balance of 2.684 million. Again, the deficit, based upon our numbers in this draft, are 4.8 million, and that's what we were looking at during the 5-year projection. That's with no tax increase. Using the Act 1 index brings the deficit down to 3.3 million, and raising to the max, almost 6%, brings it down to a $2 million deficit, and our unassigned fund balance stays within the 8% as required by Act 1. So the numbers are very similar to what we had looked at in business functions and different meetings. The opt-out resolution, it is attached to the board agenda item, and really these are the main focus points here. Just the board is certifying that any tax rate will be less than or equal to the index and will be sufficient to balance the budget, but that could include a use of fund balance. So this is how the resolution reads. And what we would do by the end of December, that is the deadline for adopting the opt-out resolution, but we've added it to the November agenda to be voted on next week if the board so chooses to do so. Are there any questions?
And I just have a clarification question. Would you say that with the preliminary budget drafts and the different scenarios of taxation that you have, I think it's on the third to last slide, would you say that that $2 million to $4.8 million deficit range is comparable to what you're showing in the 5-year forecast after you've adjusted some of this? So basically in 2022, in 2021-2022 school year, is this chart going to look pretty similar as it does right now?
Well, what we're going to see probably is the deficit's going to increase by the increase in wage and benefits. You know, anywhere from 2.2 million to 2.5. That's consistent, unless there's a drastic reduction in some areas, and I don't think we're going to be able to do anything drastic in the near term, or even maybe in the longer term, because that takes time to readjust. And with all the programs that we have and how well they're loved and how much they're needed, and especially, you know, just looking at all of our students and their needs, it just the cost have increased a lot. And, you know, I'm sure next week Dr. Miller can share, you know, how the needs of students have increased, and the consultants we need, the behavioral specialists, and, you know, just the programs that they need across the board. So going back to it, it's really, that deficit will continue to grow. And my concern is If you're, limited to the index, or if you're going to limit yourself to the index or below, then it's just going to be very challenging to try and balance the budget.
Do you think it would be challenging to balance the budget if we blew past the index and went to the next one?
I did show scenarios last spring where over a period of years, if you were to take advantage and made some assumptions about, some exceptions where you could get there with some adjustment in staffing. I think it's going to be a combination. I don't think there's any way around not increasing taxes to some level, but adjusting staffing somehow, or having your contracts, changes in benefits. Right now I don't think our contract terms are unreasonable, but I probably have said too much. It's a challenge, especially because on the revenue side, what are we getting from the state? We are getting something, but $130,000 for basic ed, about 100, the same amount for special ed, and they're rising much faster than that, our costs. So it really becomes the local effort. And so many of you have already said many times about charter school tuition. $1.5 million, and the way it's funded, the tuition we pay them is not fair. So, and that will be slow to change. So, challenging times. So the last slide is our upcoming series of budget meetings that we're going to have with the community. First one, November 21st, Reichten Elementary at 6 p.m. And we'll be discussing the elementary program. And the others will follow. They're all on a Thursday evening. And we'll look at the various aspects of our operating budget and look at options for reducing costs as well as opportunities to increase revenue.
We're going to be advertising this in the paper. We're going to do parent links. We're going to do it on our social media. We're going to reach out to the township to put it on their code red. So we're going to do everything we can to try and get stakeholders to come out. And this is what the board has asked. So we put together these meetings to be as transparent as possible for these activities and these different programs. So what we're looking for is the community to come out and voice their need, their want, or they just don't care about certain programs. And then the board will judge that and create the budget accordingly. So what we're really saying is we want the community to come out and talk to us about the budget. So we'll be making those efforts in the next few days to continually put out the advertising.
With these charter schools, especially the online charter schools, we know most of them are failing, and they're abysmal. A lot of the students, they don't even finish high school. They say they're going to charter schools and virtual charter schools, and they just maybe log in, and many of them don't do their work, and many of them drop out. What is the status here at Exeter for online charter schools, and what are we doing trying to get them back where I know Dr. Winters has talked about when he originally was at the other school district, we did get a lot of kids back on charter schools.
We've taken that initial step to kind of stop the bleeding, if you will. I think the fact that we have a virtual academy in-house that's taught by our teachers, that students that may have considered leaving to explore an outside online soccer charter before are less apt to do so because they can be involved and have the benefit of an extra diploma and get that entire experience
while taking online courses that are facilitated by our teachers. There's always work that can be done to continue to try to figure out what we have to do to get some of those kids that are in, cyber charter schools back. Sometimes it's just convincing families that, maybe you left 2-3 years ago because, you had issues with this one particular teacher that your child may have had. Well, things have changed and things have improved, and so I think it's just communicating that and continuing to be positive, but we're definitely moving in the right direction.
So how many students do we now have for Exeter that are like online charter?
I think it's like 66, is that accurate? I think it's in the 60s, I believe.
I think we're pretty much between 75 and 80.
Oh, it is that high.
But it's been that for a couple of years. It's down though from being over 100.
And so what is the amount that we have to pay for these 75 or 80?
I'll just give you the approximate number. For those that are special education, it's about $25,000, and those for that are non-special education, about $12,000.
So that rate has gone down, that's because, I remember years back, it was like over $1 million, wasn't it, for charter schools?
When you total it all up, our budget's about 1.2 to 1.4 million.
Was that then, or is it now?
Now, I think that's it
Still
now.
1.4 million.
This is a bigger issue than what we can do to bring some kids back from cyber charter schools. This is the actual idea of cyber charter schools. Right now, there's legislation in Harrisburg to try and make a level playing field, a fair playing field for school districts and cyber charter schools. The figures that Mrs. Geidish just mentioned, there is not a transparency on what it costs for students to be educated in the cyber program. Those figures are based on what our rates. There is some discussion as to, is that the same thing that a cyber charter has to pay for education of a student when they don't have facilities, they don't have transportation, they don't have all those different costs? So there is a push right now to try, and there's some bills, again, I mentioned, there's a bill by Representative Sonny to try and level the playing field. Governor Wolf has talked about leveling the playing field. The problem is the lobbyists for the cyber charter schools. When Representative Sonny's bill was introduced, in the first 4 hours, he had 6,000 emails from cyber charter schools and their parents. They are highly organized. They are funded very well. So as a district and as a public school entity, we all have to start speaking to our legislators about this situation, about how that $1.5 million would be certainly put to better use in the public school side, rather than, as you had mentioned, about the accountability and the achievement scores. So this is a bit of a call to action from not only parents and board members and administrators and teachers. This is all community members that are concerned about the raising taxes. That cyber charter bill is $1.5 billion.
And don't these charter schools too, like if it costs $10,000, say, to educate us here in Exeter, that's what they get for their charter school, right?
Since they don't have to show us their books, we have no idea. We've not been able to get to the financials of the charter schools.
Well, no, your bill though, right? Your bill?
We were billed, but there are many districts that have tried to look into the financials of the cyber charters and they don't respond.
Okay.
That goes along with the fair playing field as well as the fair funding.
So right now, how many kids are from Exeter?
About 80 answer.
About 80 some, all right? So how much are we paying for those 80?
About 1.2 million-ish.
So when you divide that, I mean, what's the cost of each one?
Your calculator out.
It's almost as much as what it is. 15,000? You know how ridiculous? Doesn't cost 15,000 for our students here.
Well, what is the number for our students?
I'd say it's about 12,000.
You also split the difference between special ed students and regular education students.
Yeah, 15 composite rate.
Okay, so but what was the 12,000 number?
That was regular ed.
That's regular ed.
Okay.
So how many special education students do you have?
I have to open up the
Mary Ann sends that to us every month, right? Yeah.
But the idea is we need to start contacting our legislators and let them know that we're upset about the money that's going to the cyber charters without accountability.
It's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
They're making money hand over fist, and there's no accountability from the charter schools.
Part of the irony is that, they're charging districts more money than really costs to educate kids, and that excess money goes to line the pockets of the legislators in Harrisburg.
Don't you like your pockets on
They're
Pockets of the people that open the charter schools.
They're one of the strongest lobbying groups in Harrisburg by far, and when Dr. Phillips says that there's power among that group in Harrisburg, these are the folks that are facilitating the reelection of a lot of the legislators in Harrisburg. That's why we're not getting anywhere, with legislation in Harrisburg right now. This is a very, very strong influential lobby, which means that, if we activated all the resources that we had in public education, all of our teachers and administrators and families, we could counter that, significantly, but they're better organized, and I think that there's not the same level of effort that we see in public education advocacy. I've talked about that a lot. We need to be a voice. We as a board, individual board members, collectively as a board, as a community, we need to speak to our legislators. We need to be active in promoting this. There's some good legislation out there. One of the things that we heard this morning, we were at the COLA meeting this morning, which is the Council on Legislative Action. Get some feedback here. But the COLA meeting, it basically, it was Dr. What's his name? Duraco. And he's the executive director of PASA, Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators. And he really did a great job, I think, of really breaking down what's happening in Harrisburg right now. We talked about charter school reform in House Bill 1897, which would require all school districts to operate their own virtual programs. And then by 2021, they would essentially shut down, 22, shut down all cyber charter schools throughout the Commonwealth. But it would be a requirement that all school districts have to do that, or join a consortium of cyber school providers, but it would save an incredible amount of money. And I was at a Pennsylvania School Boards Association conference a couple weeks ago, and we heard from the coastal area school district where Dr. Phillips used to work at one time. They've got 6,900 students in that district, that live in that district. 5,400 of those students attend coastal schools. 1,500 of those students attend charter schools, either collegiate charter school in Exeter or Avongrove Charter School, at a cost of $50 million a year to educate those kids in those settings. 50 million, that's a third of coastal school budget. It's ridiculous, and so that's why Governor Wolf, that's why the legislator, that's why I anticipate that we're going to see some changes, but we have to back that up with real advocacy on our part to really make it happen.
I just want to add to that conversation too. I think that a lot of us could agree that there should be more equity in how public school districts are judged and how charter schools are judged. But, charter schools in our budget make up $1.5 million. There are other state issues that we can advocate on too, like pension reform and the state making their fair share. Because where we're talking about $1.5 million for the last how many years of budget, we're talking a comparable figure to 1.5 million increasing every year for what we now have to add on top of that for our pension payments. And some of that is just ridiculous. And also stability in the cost of healthcare. 8% increases per year. We're seeing at least $400,000 to the district at cost every year and our current contractual obligations with that. So it's not just these charter school issues, it's also issues that organizations like PSEA are lobbying against. And if you want to know what the hardest lobbying group to fight against is, it's PSEA blocking some of these reforms about saving districts huge amounts of money. So it's not just this one issue that the problem is. On top of that, I want to pivot a little bit to what we can actually control here. If the board and the administration wants to take leadership on raising revenue in our community and being the leadership in our community to make sure that we're funding the district properly, we also have to exercise that leadership in the other way and say we can't provide everything that we want to. And I don't see a scenario in this budget projection for the next 5 years where we can't make adjustments. It's unreasonable to think that we could raise taxes above 3% for the next 5 years and levy probably close to $500 over the next 3 years on each homeowner in this community when they face increasing costs as well. We need to look at adjustments, and this can't be just talk. We've already got new requests of at least $500,000 from what I'm seeing in here, and then we also have new staffing requests of about $250,000 in here.
Mr. That's the budget that we were given. That has nothing to do, we
Sure.
haven't started to look at cuts yet, so that is coming.
I'm emphasizing that. Those need to materialize, because I won't vote for tax increases if we won't make a good faith effort at reducing what we're offering, because we can't offer the amount that we're offering now. We have the second highest tax rate in this county, and we're supposedly one of the best performing school districts around here. We're also one of the wealthiest with one of the highest assessment rates in the county. Our assessment rate is close to the city of Reading. Our $1.4 billion assessment rate for all value in this district is close to the city of Reading's. How are we having this issue? And part of that, I think, is because of what we're offering. We need to look at what we're offering and make a good faith effort to reduce that if necessary.
I would just add, though, Mr. Aarons, that fundamentally as a school board member, you have a fiduciary responsibility to support public education. And that to take the side of the cyber or charter school and allow $1.5 million to go to them without questioning that is abdicating your responsibility as a school board member.
Cyber and charter schools are public schools.
They don't have the transparency.
They are still considered public schools.
I appreciate that, Jerry, but you can't sit here and ask for complete transparency from a public school like this school district and then allow a cyber or a charter school to not go through the same level of transparency that we do as a public school system. The fiduciary responsibility of school board members to support public education, plain and simple.
Public education.
It's not public education in the sense that you are not able to, you as a taxpayer, want to know where your dollar goes. Where does your dollar go in a cyber or a charter school? You don't know.
And I don't think that there was anything different from what you just said from how I started. But I think there's also a whole lot of other issues, and we just fixate on that one.
No, but I mean, it's $1.5 million. Okay, I mean, there's one point, you guys want accountability, but you don't want accountability from everybody. You want accountability from organizations that you want accountability from.
I want accountability from everybody.
Okay,
Just in case there was that confusion.
Well, no, because I know that you've supported funding of cyber and charter schools on a vote as a school board member.
Yeah, because I don't believe that it's appropriate for the district to say that we should eliminate all cyber schools in Pennsylvania. That's parental choice for them to opt into those programs. And whether I agree with that or not is not my business. That's the opportunity for every child to receive a general education in Pennsylvania. And however parents want to provide that through their votes, whether for legislative candidates or for school board candidates, is how we have to deal with it. And there's only so much that we can do at the state level and lobby them individually. And I just thought that, going back to the resolution that you're talking about, there was more at issue in that resolution than just whether we wanted accountability on cyber or charter schools.
Well, the Pennsylvania Constitution says that we, as public officials that are in charge of public education, have a duty to have a thorough and efficient education for every student that goes to a public school. Now, everybody can say, oh, the charter schools are public schools, but we are really not, they say they're public schools, but there are a lot of charter schools that these people start them up, they get the money, and then they leave. The charter schools are up and down all over the place. They're failing, and then they close up, but they take the money with them. So that, when we have public schools, what we're doing here, everything is transparent. It's not all transparent in charter schools, and that's why I myself am against charter schools. And I don't think it's everybody has a choice. Well, you know what? We have our public schools. They're good. The school district is excellent. They provide great things for the students that come there to this school. I can't say that for charter schools. You can say it, I'm for New York, because I don't think there's no accountability.
Well,
Pat,
I
you
mean,
were raising your kids in Philadelphia, and if you were raising your kids in Philadelphia, sending them to those schools where knife attacks happen every day, where rapes literally occur in the schools, would you like to have a choice where to send your kid not to that school where your kid might get knifed?
I don't know about the knifing, and I don't know about the public schools. In fact, you know what I would do? I'd probably move if that's what's going on. I can't believe that there's knifing going on in all the public schools and down in Philadelphia. Some of them have to be good. I mean, I can't see where they're.
Yeah, but what about those people in North Philly who were locked into a school? And I mean, like they don't have a good school in front of them. They have a war zone in front of them.
Actually, one of the best high schools in Pennsylvania, Central High School in North Philadelphia, is probably one of the top schools in Pennsylvania.
One of them.
I know, I had a friend who was a physician, and he went to, his parents, he was Jewish, and his parents, he had to go to public school. And he said, you know what? He said, I had the best education in the world. He said, because I had to learn how to get along with those kids. He said, now I learned how to get along with them. He said, I went through school. A lot of the kids that was in his school, they were terrible. But you know what? He was focused in the right direction. And he became a physician. He was one of the greatest physicians that I knew. In fact, he even left the United States and went over to Australia because he didn't really like a lot of what was going on there.
Okay, can we try to move this discussion back to the budget and Jose?
I'd like to talk about it for 10 minutes first.
I have a question for Ann. When we present this at the operating budget meetings with the stakeholders, and it says elementary program review, would it be possible for us to get a pie chart? So out of the 82 million, this is how much money we spend in elementary.
For that night, so you'll have all those pies for those meetings.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense?
like what part of our 82 million is just for elementary?
For that night.
And then also be able to show whoever comes what is controlled, because we can't change this number. So,
Certain, now it goes for salaries and
Right.
so it's okay. Do that.
When we say that too, I think that there's really 3 categories of budget. This is my rule, this is not anybody else's rule. There's non-discretionary, semi-discretionary, and discretionary. We always talk about we have no control over 70% of our budget, as in our budget is not 70% non-discretionary. That's not true. We have non-discretionary obligations that we can't do anything about. They're given to us by the state, we are required to provide them. We have semi-discretionary that are controlled by our contracts. Those are what we can control, but there are only windows and periods of time where we can affect those. And then there's discretionary. Can we make sure that when we're talking about that, we're not talking about it as, if we're talking about a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan to combat some of these expenses, which is something that we've alluded to, we're not going to just write off and say, we can't do anything about it.
Should be clear, the budget will be presented, will be 2021. We're not talking about 5 years on the 21st of November. It'll be as asked, elementary budget, the pie chart. And there are going to be contractual obligations in there that cannot be changed.
But are you suggesting that we're going to then have these meetings to talk about the services that parents and key stakeholders desire for the next 5 years when we're going through this? Because this isn't just a 2020, 2021 issue. I mean, we're going to have these challenges for the next couple of years.
We were under the understanding we're presenting the 2021 budget.
Well, that's fine, but it's part of a conversation, I think, that is a lot more significant than that.
Sure, we have to have a discussion, looking at the elementary, looking at in their schedules, what is not mandated. What's really the basic quality education that this district wants to offer. It's going to be a very long discussion, I think, because there are parts of the music program which are not mandated, but are near and dear to our music population in this district. So that it's going to be, we have to talk about that and putting a number to it. This is what's costing for these non-mandated music services that we provide our young children K through 6. So that's one thing we'll discuss. We'll look at class sizes and how it relates to board policy, which we are adhering to board policy. So there's really nothing we can do about that. But we'll address all those different issues, looking at supplies, what is discretionary. So, and looking at different matrix. So yeah, we'll have those discussions. And then secondary, in December is going to be more challenging because we'll be talking about student activities, which are not mandated. Athletics are non-mandated, but they're so critical to education of the student. So that's the discretionary. We have to address that and how we can continue to fund it.
I have a question about something that's going to come up in our business functions section of the agenda, which is the authorization of bids, advertising bids for tour school buses. Do you have a sense of what those tour buses will come in at in terms of costs? Just very roughly. Did you budget that into is that budgeted in?
It's budgeted at the asset cost of about $416,000, but I've also put in financing, meaning I have it as a source of revenue of $416,000. Vehicle costs $416,000, what the financing might be is about $116,000 per year. That's just a rough estimate because it's part of the bid specifications that we're working on and parts that are preliminary, that are new to me, are to include financing options, whether it's the dollar buyout financing, or a municipal lease, where it's pure rental and you turn it over every 6 years. So I'm talking to different people, and this we want to include in the bid specifications. As well as putting in alternates, possibly for the 77-passenger bus to rotate.
So it includes both lease and propane options in the bid specification?
Rick and I are working on that. We have work to do because our bids have been traditional, cash purchase. So that's why I'm talking to different people who have experience with it. How do we incorporate financing options as well as putting in an alternate for propane? Just kind of broaden the whole process so we have options to talk about once these things.
Any other comments? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet?
Yeah, I still have a couple.
Really? Trying to limit the conversation when we want
He's
to.
just coming back.
He just calls us big mouths, so you know.
Got it. Thanks for coming
I
back.
just have a couple
Mrs.
things.
Stroud?
Yes, with the meetings, there's just three things that kind of came to my mind. The first one is a little over a week away. A little over a week away. It was making too much noise. The first one is a little over a week away, and that concerns me that there isn't more notice given. I love that we're doing this, but, you know, like if we're gonna start advertising and the methods you said are great, like, we need to do them tomorrow, because
I
already
think I
like.
said that.
What?
I said we're gonna start tomorrow.
Like, so it's gonna be in the paper tomorrow, the alert from the township is gonna be out tomorrow?
Tomorrow's the papers for the weekend.
Okay, because at that rate, they've got 4 or 5 days. So that's my biggest concern is, you know, we want people to come to these things, but we're not even giving them a week's notice at that rate. So, you know, if we can get this on Facebook and we get on the website and we can, you know, start alerting parents, that would be fantastic. I don't know, I know Hunter always asks about this, but doing a video of it, if that's possible, I think that would be beneficial for people that can't attend. So they have the opportunity to see what is discussed. I would love that, live stream it. And then the other thing is a lot of the excuse, I'm going to use that word, I don't know that that's the right word, but that parents use as to why they don't come to these things is because they don't get a chance to engage or be heard. And I know you said that they will, that it will be, you know, a conversation. I just want to point out that we can really make sure that that happens. You know, so if we do a presentation for, you know, 40 minutes, we got to give more than 10 minutes for parents to be able to engage and talk and feel heard. Because if they don't want to come and just listen. If that was the case, they would come more often, I think. I think that they really want their input heard, so give them that chance to be able to do that. Those are my suggestions. What you do with them, of course, is up to you, but those are my suggestions.
Sounds fair plan. Thank you.
And with the propane buses, did you look into what the state has, what, 47 million? Would there be any chance of us getting a fleet of propane buses?
Well, I believe our thought at this point is to, since we're only looking at a couple 77 passenger, looking at an alternative, just, you know, 1 or 2, for us to get a fleet, I think we need to know more about where our location is going to be. There is funding, the AFIC funding. You can get up to $40,000 of the incremental cost between a diesel or the cost of propane. The deadline is December 13th, so I'm trying to see how that would fit in with everything, because we're looking at leasing, we may not qualify for that. They also have the refueling project funds, but you must have you know, a fleet in existence, and in order to apply for those funds, you need to know your location, you need to have payback analysis, site engineering plans. So that's in the future, once we decide where we're going to be with our facility. So right now, refueling project funds is not in the horizon for this year, but I am looking at this other option, incremental cost.
Do you think maybe when the township, you know, uses all of where across the street from, you know, that bank that they had, you know, all right off of Rosemary, do you think that they, you know, and they get that also, but maybe even the township buying that whole land over there?
You're talking about the Giant Center?
Yeah.
Yeah, they want it.
Oh, they would. But do you think that we could, I'm sure their fleet's going down there, they have pretty much land now. do you think they would work with the school district, that if they did have a propane station down there, that we could also, work with them? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they put propane, I don't sense that they're gonna do that. I also know that they have over 150 total vehicles for the township, so we have eyes on that facility, but my sense is that they're just not gonna be able to accommodate us to the level that we think that they could possibly accommodate us. That's been my preliminary discussions with them, not official per se, so, but I would say that we should look for collaboration, but I'm not going to expect that they're going to just lay down.
Are they nasty or what?
No, seriously, they're not nasty. I mean, I do think we've had, with Vinny, we just had good discussions with Vinny. We probably need to sit down more formally with them, but, I think we have to solve our own problem. If we can solve a problem in collaboration with them, that would be great. But the township, I don't think we know. I mean, if you just look at the police vehicles alone that they have when you drive up, we can do, I don't think they're using propane though. I don't think so.
I think probably they will eventually because, I think it's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mrs. Gadish regarding the motion? Proposed motion? Okay, discussion. We'll move on. We have the next section, which is public comments. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board? Anything from the agenda or any other topics that may be applicable for the board to hear? Okay, seeing none, we're going to walk through this workshop agenda, recognizing that these are the items that will be on the agenda for next Tuesday for a voting meeting. We'll have two sets of board minutes. One is the board workshop minutes from the 8th, and then the board voting minutes of October 15th. Getting into board policy, we can have some additional conversation about some of these. I did a preliminary review of the first 4 of the policies that were on here for second reading, and realizing that the administration has not prepared us for a vote. There is some opt-in, opt-out language that should have been recommended. This wasn't done. So those 4 policies, 805, which is emergency preparedness and response, 805.1, relationship with law enforcement agencies, the next one, which is school security personnel, and then opening exercises and flag displays. They all need more work, so I'm recommending taking them off the agenda for next Tuesday, and then resubmit them for a second reading with the necessary additions to those policies that we have requested. Moving on through, the only one that can really be up for approval will be the transportation, audio, and video recording policy, and that's the 10.2. The new policies that we've introduced here for the first reading, and I would encourage all of you to take a look at these when you can. First reading will be school vehicle drivers. And in reading through that, a school vehicle is different than a school bus. A school vehicle is 10 or less students on a bus, and the provisions in that particular policy speak pretty much consistently to the aspects of drug and alcohol abuse and the importance of assessing drivers along that way. Bonding, 811. The policy for bonding is also for first reading, and then just some very minimal changes in that policy to just bring up, I think, to to code. The property insurance, another one for first reading, a little bit of language that was added to appoint an insurance advisor, and that's basically the only change from the existing policy. Policy 813, other insurance, that policy was updated for more clarity and organization, deleted some information regarding some types of insurance coverage, and included liability insurance. So it was replaced with PSB's model policy language, which is more general. The 814 copyright material, some minor changes. That was an existing policy. Added some language on including students and their copyright policies. Deleted some of the district's guidelines, which were more procedural, better suited for administrative regulations. That's pretty much it. I mean, it had to really kind of conform to copyright law. And so some minor adjustments were made to that policy. 815, internet computers and network resources. First reading for 815. This is a fairly significant policy, very broad. This was an existing policy as well. Some minor changes were made to update for clarity. So it really did add some language. The state and district would provide access to district technology resources. Updated some language in regard to internet blocking and the opportunity for the district to lift some of the internet blocking in cases where students needed to access content on the internet. And then there are several policies that are being marked for deletion. So on page 6 of the agenda, all of these remaining policies are being recommended for deletion, and I think most, if not all of them, are recommended to be considered as an administrative regulation because of the level of detail, which isn't necessarily perfect for policy, but might make good regulation. So again, I'm going to encourage our staff to look very carefully at these deleted policies to make sure we're not overlooking anything that needs to move into administrative regulation. Once these are no longer in our policy manual, there may be a lot of detail that we lose if we don't pull that detailed language out of there and put it into administrative regulation. So please do that. And special attention, as I said before, to the safe schools and policies in the very beginning of this agenda. Are there any questions about the policies? Okay. So we'll move on to business functions. Mr. Bell.
Thanks, Dr. Amber. Next week we'll be voting on advertising for bids of transportation vehicles, the fiscal year 2018-19 audit report, the opt-out resolution, and budget transfer.
Any discussion or questions about any of those items in business functions? Okay. We're going to move to Personnel Committee. Mr. Trevino.
Thank you, Dr. Amber. We will be reviewing a variety of personnel issues, including appointments of certificated substitutes, as teachers and support substitutes, change of status, leaves of absence, course requests, and conference requests.
Any questions or discussions? Thank you, Mr. Trevino. Student functions, Mrs. Stratton.
Well, we're recording on field trips that occur within the 60-mile radius, as well as voting on field trips beyond the 60-mile radius, early graduation, the Girls on the Run program, and dissertation research trainings.
Questions, comments, discussion? The Girls on the Run program does not require any additional resources from the district, is that correct? Sure. So there's no coach or advisor that's paid for it? It's all volunteer.
Do we have that currently in any of the schools?
Just the junior high has done it in the past, and we're looking to continue to do it.
I believe Lorraine does it as well.
Right to your.
Pretty sure Lorraine's got it.
It's crossing the line.
Okay, good. I just have a quick question about early graduation.
This is the first time we've had this amount.
And I was over at the high school this morning meeting with the school counselors and Mr. Campbell, and that topic came up, and I know all the school counselors indicated that all of those students are very kind of well-organized and very excited about the possibility. Many of them have plans either to begin taking general education college courses or to begin, working, and that they're very appreciative that this opportunity is there.
The students come back for graduation exercise.
Yes.
If there are no other questions about the agenda, are there any board members who would like to be heard this time? If not, the meeting will be adjourned, and just want to remind our group that we do have an executive session scheduled for this.